He was more than an acquaintance, but I wouldn't exactly call him a good friend. I went all through high school as a classmate with John, and he had cancer all through high school. So there would be some spells where he just couldn't be at school for a while. And it was shortly after we graduated as seniors from high school that John died after living with cancer for so many years. And it was devastating, of course, for the people around him, for his family and his friends and loved ones. And later, once I had gotten to school, to college, I had a dream one night, and John was there in that dream. And I got to talk to this not great friend, kind of gentle friend, because we didn't know each other very well, but there we were in this dream, and he was saying how great he was and how much better he felt. And there was 2 people with him, and they said, well, he can't stay, but we're coming to say hello. And it was this mystical thing. And I don't know what it was. And I didn't know at the time, but I felt like it was something, that it was a little bit more than a dream, that there was some peace and some hope that came from that short interaction. Maybe that was just in my head. And when I told a friend about it, another person from our class, her response was sort of that rational, grounded, guarded response of, well, I think sometimes our minds just do what we need to do to make us feel better. And that might be the case, but why is it that that's our instinct, to try to get others to believe exactly how we believe, or to understand the world exactly how we understand the world? And then on the other hand of that, why did it bother me so much that my friend didn't believe in the mystical experience that I felt? I didn't need her to believe in it, except that I did. I really needed her to affirm it. I think that's common because we don't do faith on our own. Here we are, needing a whole community to walk alongside us, to be a part of this journey and to be a part of our faith and belief. And I think that's because believing is really hard. It's really, really difficult, especially because belief so often is just wrapped up in this container of hope. And hope is a frightening thing. Even when I was in kindergarten, I started developing this thing where I didn't want to get my hopes up for something. There was a drawing for this big classroom picture that we'd made. And I sat there and I remember consciously thinking, I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to get it. To try to not get my hopes up, to try to reverse psychology, the luck of the drawing. That time it actually worked. I won the drawing. But so it really fortified this idea that if we hope so much for something, if we want something so badly, and then it all turns to nothing and the hope doesn't pan out, or the awful thing happens anyway, what does that mean about the world? What does that mean about God? What does that mean about who we are as humans? How do we deal not with hope, but with crushed hope, with disappointment? The scripture today starts with this call to see the signs, to notice all of the things around you, the coming of what's to come. And now this is, again, like I mentioned, this is not your typical Christmas message. We don't hear the angels yet. There's none of the calling for the baby Jesus to be born. This is an apocalyptic piece of literature. Holly mentioned that last week too, and it's apocalypse, not so much like an asteroid is going to hit the earth and everything is going to be destroyed. Apocalyptic literature is more from the perspective of all of the old things that are going to fall away, and God's going to turn it on its head. Everything's going to be flipped upside down and made into something different. And in that, we hear something for us about this Advent season. We hear a call about what we're to do. All those active verbs: look, be alert, be ready, be on guard, be watching, be listening. It's kind of an instruction manual for the state of mind we can take for this season, that we are ready to watch. This is a how-to on this season when we enter the dark days, when we enter the shadows, when we enter this time of fear and difficulty, because it's in the depths of the shadows that hope really has its deepest, truest meaning. Hope comes from the shadows. Dr. T. Dixon is a trauma surgeon, and apparently that's like 16 years of training before you're full on done with all of the training. And during the thick of that, sometime later in those 16 years, you're still like, you're in charge of things. You're the chief of trauma surgery during this one rotation. And that's exactly where Dr. T found herself when she was working. It was before the 80 hours a week limit. She was working 130 hours a week when there's only 160 hours in the whole week. So like 30 hours off, 130 on, and just really worn down by it. Just totally beat and broken and unsure if this was the right path. One night, there was a 16-year-old girl who decided to drive to McDonald's to get something to eat, come back home. She didn't put on her seatbelt. She took a curve a little too fast. And when she wrecked, she flew out her window and the car landed on top of her. And her injuries were just so extensive. I mean, she had brain and lung contusions and pelvic fractures and splenic damage, just 5 different injuries that each one could kill her. And that's how she arrived in the ICU with Dr. T. They were doing everything they could. And soon after, the family arrived and Dr. T had a moment to go talk to them. When she spoke to them, she was honest. She said, "I'm not sure if your daughter will make it through the night. There's all of these injuries," and she detailed them all. But then she doesn't want to leave them without any hope because she didn't think it was hopeless. So she said, "Look, she's 16 years old. She's healthy. She seems like she's fit. If anybody can survive this, it's going to be her." And the family was still hysterical. I mean, sobbing and wailing. What else would you do? And Dr. T turned to go back to work to try to save this girl. And she said it got really quiet. And the mom just all of a sudden very calmly said, "She's going to be okay." And Dr. T stopped and turned around like, "Okay." And the mom said, "She's going to be okay. Her name, you're Jane Doe. Her name is Savannah." And it's that time that Dr. T realized that she was wearing her normal scrubs top, but for some reason, and she said maybe this was the first time this had ever happened, she happened to be wearing the scrubs from where she did her residency, Savannah, Georgia. And the word Savannah was written right across her butt. And there, that word, for whatever reason, had just given this family hope. I know a lot of people who see things like that. A sign, maybe. I know a friend told me about a mom who lost her child and started seeing butterflies everywhere. Not just like walking around outdoors in the butterfly garden, butterflies in their house 4 different times, a butterfly. And somebody else who said they saw dimes. They started finding dimes everywhere. And it reminded them of their loved one, or a color, or a time on the clock. Just something that all of a sudden, not that they weren't there before, but all of a sudden, they started seeing them, hearing them, noticing them. And that's the miracle in it. Because the fact of what's happening, maybe there's a logical explanation. Maybe the butterflies have a butterfly nest in the ceiling whatever, it doesn't matter if there's a factual reason behind it. The grace here is in noticing God's presence, the presence of love, the presence of grace right among us. That's where the miracle really, really lies, in orienting ourselves towards noticing that God is among us in this world. It is a deep place, this world. Existence is not easy. I kind of joke sometimes like, well, it's not easy being a person. And it's the truth, it's not easy being a person because awful things happen, whether they're done by us or whether they're just the accidents, the things that happen from living a life in this world. Awful things happen and it's really hard to have hope. And you know what? I'm not sure if hope alone is enough. Dr. T worked with Savannah for some months after her accident. And every time, even though Savannah was unconscious, every time she went in there to do some of these painful procedures, she'd try to warn Savannah and say, like, okay, we're gonna do this and it's gonna hurt, always telling her what was going on and what was happening, greeting her when she came in the room. And she even told herself, I know she can't hear me, but she kept doing it. She kept that practice going. And some months went by and there were 30 different cases on this floor. She moved to a different case and then she was moved to a different hospital. And a year later, and she had kind of lost track of Savannah until one day she was in the hospital and she was talking to a nurse. She noted how loud her voice is, that it carries all around. So she's talking to this nurse and a girl comes up to her and says, Dr. T, it's me. And it took her a second as the girl lowered her shirt to show the scar. And it was Savannah, who she thought surely wouldn't walk, surely would have brain damage, surely wouldn't be okay after all of this, even just living through it. But there she was, and she seemed to be good. And oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. And wow, thank you so much for all your care. And then it dawned on Dr. T, wait a second, how'd you know it was me? You were unconscious the entire time I cared for you. And Savannah said, I recognized your voice. She'd heard her all along. An act of good love never, ever falls flat on this earth and is for nothing. An act of good love means a lot. Just so we're clear, the good and the love that we do, when we convince ourselves that that doesn't matter, that is the lie, because all of those acts matter. Sometimes an act of good or an act of love is just that, and that's it. It's just an act of good and love, and it doesn't continue on. And that's enough. Honest to God, that is enough. But then there are times, sometimes an act of good and an act of love echoes and reverberates, and it can cut through any barrier that we could possibly imagine, and then some. Sometimes it rings and echoes. Is hope enough? No, I don't think so. But hope, with our actions, our care, our love behind it, and with God underneath and behind it all, that just might do it. May it be so. Amen.